Hey everyone, welcome to this episode of the DevelopSec Newscast. Today we're going to talk about news that's interesting, but also that helps us understand how we can do better on our own applications to protect us going forward. So the first news story we want to talk about is Google two-factor authentication. It comes out in the Usenix Enigma 2018 presentation that less than 10% of Gmail or Google users actually use multi-factor authentication. Now we know multi-factor authentication is important because it helps protect us from attacks where we've had credentials stolen from other applications, right? We're reusing those credentials across different applications. And this causes a problem because I can then take those credentials, and because we reuse the same email address or logins across applications, then go log into your application in another account. So we use a second factor or multi-factor authentication, so that way when you get the username and password and enter it correctly, then you're prompted for another factor, right? And in most cases, it's an SMS token that's sent to you. You can use Google Authenticator. There's a bunch of different authenticator apps that are available to help protect you. But it's important to make sure that on all the applications that we have, if we have multi-factor available, then we should be enabling this. And we have a demo coming up after the newscast that shows how to go into Google and enable two-factor authentication to help protect your account. But we're going to make sure we're doing this, and a lot of people aren't. So from organization standpoint, we need to make sure that if we're using things like Gmail, Outlook, all these different offerings that are there, that if they have two-factor, we're enforcing that. Go in and set that up for your organization. If you're a regular user, then you want to make sure that you're coming through and setting that up for each account that you have, but that's going to really help protect you. Oftentimes we think that mail isn't that important, but we also use mail for a lot of two-factor authentication, right? You might get mailed a code and you need to get into that, or you get recovery options. I forgot my password. I get a link to be able to recover my account. That comes through email. So we really want to make sure, especially with email, that we're protecting our accounts to make sure that somebody can't gain access to any of our other applications. So keep that in mind when you're looking at the applications that you have and the ways that you can protect that. Most applications today have two-factor capabilities. You just have to go in and enable those. Now, the next story we have, Tinder. Everybody loves Tinder. So if you're using it, what are the privacy concerns that may be there? And it was just an article that came out talking about how they encrypt some of their communications between the mobile app on your iPhone or Android device and the server. So when we think about privacy in that, we're talking about transportation privacy, right? The data between your device flowing all the way up to the back-end server. So as you're sitting there flipping through images and doing stuff in the application, anybody on the wire can't see what's actually happening. Well, in this case, what was found is most of the data is actually encrypted, right? It's protected in transit. So who you are, all your account data, all that stuff is actually protected. But it was found that the photos that you're seeing, that you're swiping left and swiping right to, is actually not protected. So those photos are coming across in clear text. Somebody sitting in the same coffee shop on the same network can actually see those photos going back and forth across the wire. Now, what's interesting about this is that while we can see the photos, we really don't know who they're associated with. So you're really not losing who you are. And these photos, have been, willfully and voluntarily uploaded so that way you can see them, right? They're not secret photos, but it's an indication that, hey, we've got some piece that wasn't being encrypted. And when we look at protecting our data, we look at thinking, hey, we want to encrypt all the data going back and forth, not just certain pieces. And so being able to see the photos may not seem like that big of a deal. Okay, yeah, we can see photos, but we could see those anyway. Log into Tinder, you can go see them. So it's not that big of a deal that we can see that, but there's other issues with being able to intercept traffic going back and forth, being able to maybe manipulate that traffic. So if I could change those photos that are coming down, what could I do with that? That could be something of a concern. Now, in addition, with the encrypted traffic, they also found that the encrypted traffic was predictable. So whether you swiped right or whether you swiped left, you could tell just by even looking at the encrypted traffic whether you swiped right or whether you swiped left. So now I've got a photo and I've got whether you liked it or rejected it. I can determine that. I still don't know who, so I'd still have to be looking at your shoulder to see that, oh, you're the one looking at these photos. But I'm getting a little bit more information. Now, the encrypted piece is interesting because at least we're encrypting it. Now, it was recommended that they actually pad the encryption so that way you can't tell. But to be fair, if you were to encrypt the photo, then you still wouldn't know which photo is being liked and which one's not being liked. So there's lots of things you could do here, but from an organizational standpoint and a development standpoint, when you're looking at your apps and you're thinking about privacy, look to make sure that you're encrypting everything that's going back and forth, whether it's photos, even if it's something that doesn't seem important. We want to make sure that we are encrypting that data so that way it is protected going back and forth. Even if it's not sensitive, we don't want people to be able to manipulate that data to be able to change and maybe affect the end users that we have using these systems. So just keep that in mind as you're using these systems out there. Now, another interesting thing out there is Electron. I don't know how many people have used Electron or seen Electron. You've probably used it. You may not have known it. Electron's a popular programming framework to create cross-platform applications that work, on anything basically. With the same code base. It uses JavaScript, it uses CSS, HTML, right? It's using kind of those client-side technologies to build these cross-platform applications. If you use things like Skype, Slack, right? A bunch of these all use Electron in the background. That's how they're built, so that way they work across the platform. Well, it was identified that if you register your own protocol handler, that there could be a vulnerability that could be abused by an attacker. So when I say own protocol handler, right, if you're doing something where if I type Slack : / or my app : / right, these are ways that from other applications I can call into my application. So I can send somebody a link, or I can put a link on my web page that says, hey, if you want to go to my Slack channel, click this link, and it'll start with Slack : / and then the link to my channel. And then when you click it, it'll actually open up the Slack application and bring you to it. Same thing when you do with Skype, right? You can send Skype numbers and you click it and it'll open it up in Skype. So there's lots of cool things you can do with this, but apparently there was a vulnerability found with this that if you're using that type of technology, then you could be at risk. So the recommendation there is if you're using Electron for your frameworks to build your applications, make sure you're going out and grabbing the latest version, right? We always want to make sure we're keeping up to date on the software we use. Even these third-party pieces, we got to make sure that we're keeping those up to date. So this is great. They come out and say, hey, we've got this. You need to update. If you're somebody that's building these apps, you need to go out and make sure you update. Now, this was something that was only affecting Windows operating systems. So apps running on other operating systems weren't affected by this, just ones running on Windows. The latest report is that Slack, Skype, not vulnerable to this if you're running the latest version. So if you're not, make sure you go out and grab the latest versions of these applications to make sure that you're protected as an end user, but also as development, if you're using Electron, make sure that you're just pulling the latest version and making sure everything's patched up and running as it should be. So hopefully this news helps you out. You find it interesting and it helps build up what you're doing from an application security standpoint as a developer, as QA, but also as an end user, how you can be staying up to date on current things that are happening and understanding how much does this affect me and what do I need to do to make sure that I'm protected. So thanks for listening to the news, and we'll see you on the next broadcast.